in the end. But I will say, the more you... oh boy, I got so many. Okay. Yeah, time's running out. Well, you can call it madness. I was going to tell you about this friend of mine's experience in New York, who I didn't see her for 7 years. I met her in the 60s when I went there in 69. And I didn't see her for 7 years, and when I came back, I hadn't heard from her in all that time. When I saw her again, her hair was falling out, she was overweight, she was pale. And then finally she told me she'd had a nervous breakdown. Well, I went to New York for 3 winters in a row. I think around 79, 80, 81. And spent a lot of time with her. Well, she had 2 more. She was in and out of the hospital. She had 2 more nervous breakdowns. And finally she shot herself. But it has a happy ending because she survived. But she stuck a gun in her mouth, pulled the trigger, blew out a couple teeth, and survived. And when I called her, one of her best friends in New York, somebody called me and told me this, and I called this other friend, and the friend said, well, it's the most real thing she's ever done. And in a kind of cynicism, but it was also true, because since that time, my friend has really organized her life differently. I think she's on a minimal dose of some drug. But what it is now is she knows what it's like. That when you go that far, she said, I told her about Life After Life and that book, and she read part of it, but she didn't read the part on suicide. And she said she expected to hear angels and so forth. And what she felt was incredible violence. And I told her, well, you should have read the chapter on suicide in that book, because suicide, according to that author, comes off a little bit differently. Well, obviously I can't tell you that whole story, but let's see, what happened to... Okay, there was one other case, though, which was real dramatic for me, and that was when I was in the middle of writing this play about Nietzsche. Okay, believe it or not, I was living in this little basement room in West Berlin, and I'd been living in Greece. I got tired of all the beauty. I said, okay, I'm going to go to Berlin. And this place was really ugly. It was in the workers section of town. There's a big courtyard that seemed to be full of coal dust, and you had to step down into my room. It had big, heavy curtains over the windows. So anyway, I was sitting there writing this play of Nietzsche, and about Nietzsche. And I'll just read you one scene. He goes off. I hope I got it right here. Okay. At one point in Nietzsche's life, in 1870, he gets caught up in the Franco-Prussian War, and he goes off as an orderly, and I guess he helps the wounded. And on the way back, he's in a boxcar with all these wounded people. He's not wounded, but he's helping them. There's a boxcar, wounded and sick soldiers, moaning, cries, laughter. Nietzsche stands frozen in the center of the wounded, holding a bowl of water into which he looks as into a mirror. Nietzsche, I looked at this world as if it mirrored myself. Why was I horrified? Soldier, water, water. Delirious soldier. And then I said, and it was too late. Laughs hysterically. Another soldier, water, water. Nietzsche's running around giving a little, and he gets more and more frantic in the scene, giving people water. Delirious soldier, she loves me, she loves me. What good did that do? Laughs hysterically. Nietzsche moves faster and faster from soldier to soldier. Delirious soldier, you slut, you bitch, you fucking whore. Soldiers, water, water. So, delirious soldier, you love me, so what? Laughs hysterically. So repetition here over again. Your son is a soldier, your wife is in bed, I wish I were dead. Taunts. Soldiers, water, water. Scene turned this way. Almost running, Nietzsche trips and falls on a wounded soldier who shrieks in agony. Another soldier rises up behind Nietzsche, wearing the face of a skull. He spreads out his blanket behind him, like black wings. Another soldier rises up, whose face is an open wound, and another and another. Nietzsche sees them and throws himself terrified out of the boxcar. They follow him like phantoms. Nietzsche tries to escape, but the scene is now swarming with apparitions. They capture Nietzsche. They toss him high in the air. They continue tossing him. Okay, this is about 6:30 in the morning when I finished writing this, and there's a knock on my door. Now, I know one other person in Berlin. This is, and I can't go into her story, but this is somebody else who she was studying to be a doctor, and about 4 years after this, she did take her own life, too. Okay, there's a knock on the door, and I knew it wouldn't be her, though, at 6:30 in the morning. So I opened the door, and a policeman was standing there. German policeman in blue uniform, smiling at me, and he hands me a telegram. I open the telegram, and it says, "Your father died yesterday of a heart attack. Call mother." So at that point, it was just like, it's funny because as a writer, I was watching my own mind go, even at this moment. And I was having all those thoughts they have in books, and it was like racing, but it was watching myself. And then I tried to tell the policeman what the telegram was. He didn't want to know. He just smiled, turned, and walked away. So the only thing I could do at that point was go upstairs and tell my friend and so forth. So I had some companionship at that point. Well, my point is that who knows the connection between that scene and what actually happened at that moment. And I think if you're playing with madness as a method to be creative, you're really playing with fire. And it's not going to be productive for very long. And though we have a lot of works from people who use this method, they usually did burn out very early and were gone. Okay, just one last little part here, because since we're young creators and we can just pour it out for those 10 years, well, what happens after that? You just give up working? You give up writing? And here's an interview in New York Times book review with Garcia Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude. Well, he's now 57. And he says working when you're older, and you can think of, I haven't read 100 Years of Solitude, but I can think of Marquez sort of being in this ballpark in some way. A lot of fantasy world stuff, other world stuff. This is what he says about getting older as a writer. And the interview asked him, he says, do you work very differently now than when you were young? And Marquez says, the writing process is very different. When you are young, you write almost, well, every writer is different, I'm talking about myself, almost like writing a poem. You write on impulses and inspiration. You have so much inspiration that you are not concerned with technique. So this is definitely true of myself. I don't know about other people, but it just comes out, and you've absorbed it, and it just comes out. You just see what comes out, without worrying much about what you are going to say and how. On the other hand, later, you know exactly what you are going to say and what you want to say, and you have a lot to tell. Even if all your life you continue to tell about your childhood, later you are better able to interpret it, or at least interpret it in a different way. Well, Rimbaud never got that far. He's the poet of childhood and adolescence, but never got a chance to reinterpret that later. When you are older, when the inspiration diminishes, you depend more on technique. If you don't have that, everything collapses. There is no question that you write much more slowly, with much more care, and perhaps with less inspiration. This is the great problem of the professional writer. When I was 20, I wrote a daily story for a newspaper, and at times even some editorials on the same day. Then at night, when everyone had left the newsroom, I would stay to write a short story or work on a novel. There is a story called The Night of the Curlews, one of my first. It was the time when we put out a weekly literary magazine in Barranquilla called La Crónica. At one point, the editor suddenly found he was left with 2 empty pages. So in the evening, I sat down and wrote the story. One evening. I couldn't do that today. If I had it completely worked out, I would still need at least 2 or 3 weeks to write it. Worse, not many years ago, I wrote a story of 15 pages and bought a package of 500 sheets of paper. When I had finished the story, I had used up all 500 to write 15. Besides, I always used to write at night and write smoking. It's a disadvantage of youth that you almost always write when you are tired. You sit down only after you've done everything you have to do to make a living. Then with time, you become more of a professional and you organize your life. When the time came that I no longer had to work in a newspaper and could only write, I found it very hard to sit down in the morning and write during the day. Then as I got older, I had to stop smoking. I had never written a word without smoking. So when you read 100 Years of Solitude, you really smoke all over. So I had a choice: wait until I get used to not smoking, or learn to write without it right away. I tried right away, and it was extremely difficult. Only then I realized that I used to stop writing, not because I was so tired, but because I was so intoxicated from the cigarettes. I'm much older now, but I wake up feeling fresh. Another great difference between one age and another to me is memory. I never used to write down all the ideas that occurred to me while writing. I believed that if I forgot them, they were not important, and the ones that really mattered were those I remembered. Now I write them all down. It makes me very anxious to know that I thought of something, but I forget. Something I was going to say, that I read, where I read it, a melody I cannot recall. At a certain age, you begin forgetting names, things. It's a real cause of anguish. By the way, did any of you see the film on Proust Tuesday night? Great movie. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's called Celeste, and it's from the point of view of his housekeeper, who helps him the whole time he's writing and remembrance of things past. And here's a guy who goes out, right, and is recalling and setting up meetings and interviewing people to find out what they, because he wants to know exactly. He says, I don't have much imagination, so I have to go try to find out everything that happened 20 years ago. So anyway, Marquez says the same thing. It's a real cause of anguish that one has to learn to overcome. It's not easy. A lot of one's work deals with form, and you can get obsessive or desperate about a detail. So now I take notes. I scribble a phrase or a point I may need tomorrow. There are advantages and disadvantages in aging. I've come to realize, though, there is one thing for which you need to be young, and that is to learn the technique of writing, the tricks of the trade. If you don't learn that when you're young, you won't when you're old. Well, Joseph Conrad might disagree, but, it's been done. So what, I was just thinking, some of the things that you really, to switch over from being a romantic, first of all, you can become a professional in the Marquez sense, and you work like a professional writer. That you have to somehow accommodate yourself to the reality of other people. And if you have money like Proust, it's easier because you can set things up for yourself. It's harder if you're a poor older artist and you haven't made it yet. But again, just to get out of the romantic is a general problem for all of us. And one of the things I like the most is Gary Snyder's solution, which is Zen Buddhism. And I brought up things on that. But again, this is a case of where the whole objective of enlightenment, as I read it, is you go through all these rigorous, you sit, just shoot a bow and arrow, whatever. You go through a rigorous discipline in order to get the spontaneity. In the end, the idea is that you come out spontaneous from that process. But it's not by killing yourself with drugs. It's by killing yourself sitting in a chair, you could say. But this is what Suzuki says, D.T. Suzuki says about Zen and the art of swordsmanship. And I think this fits with all creation. It says, it is the unconscious which works behind the field of consciousness. Ordinarily, it is the consciousness that creates all sorts of inhibitions and obstructs the free movements of the man. Now, as we get older, one of Jung's theories is we become more conscious. We have more experience. We know more about life. We don't jump into things because lots of times we know how they're going to turn out. And so we're withholding ourselves, I think, more as we get older. Because of ideologically or emotionally created inhibitions, he, the swordsman, fails to see or detect the movements of the enemy's sword with the immediacy of the moon casting its reflection on the water. The seeing is the all-important factor in the art of swordsmanship. When this is done, the acting of the body and limbs instantly follows. The unconscious, therefore, must be brought out and made to occupy the entire field of mentation. So when you're going into battle, you're really seeing everything with your unconscious. So that you're not just focusing with your eyes here, but you're somehow seeing with your unconscious all around you. See the entire field of mentation, so that what is primarily there is a force of instinctual irresistibility that makes free use of the consciously accumulated knowledge. So there you get it. Instinctual irresistibility makes free use of the consciously accumulated knowledge. And I think that's what Marquez is talking about. And that each of us, as we get older, if we want to maintain and still have that creativity and the spontaneity, we're going to have to work a lot harder for it, keep it. And there, I think at that point we've gone beyond the destructive method. I just want to end with a couple of poems because this is too. Well, here's one on enlightenment, and this is a Chinese poet And one thing about Chinese poetry, it has a lot of people being lonely and sad, but it also, they're really into the Buddhist thing. And a lot of them do at least have those moments of eternity in the present that are always here, but most of the time we don't see them. Except when we take drugs, and then we see the eternity right away. But then we have the, then we lose it. So here, this is called enlightenment. A breach of clear heaven opens in the clouds. To the southwest, the river stretches smooth and still. There are tattered skirts of mist on the sandbar. On the wall, a magpie shakes his wet feathers and scolds. Beyond the rooftops, the thunder is still grumbling. I decide to profit by the fresh air and pay myself a small sum of peace. I hunt busily for some fine words to announce the return of good weather and the splendor of the evening. But I have no one to share them with. So I sit quietly and watch the Milky Way light up. I am suffused with its glow. All my spirit is illuminated. Okay, I think I'll end with that. So, from my point of view, madness is not a good method. Can I answer questions or just any responses? Or Clark?
I was just wondering if you had any theory about why the connection between madness and creativity is something that's relatively recent, in the 19th or late 18th century. You don't hear much of it before that, except for a few isolated things like Plato's description of the poet. Nobody really thought that Dante and Chaucer had to be mad to write.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the year before that you get Love and Madness in Shakespeare. But I personally feel it's the coming of industrialization, and it's the machine age. In other words, we're all surrounded, in one sense, by madness. It's almost like trying to cure it with itself. It's like giving a small dose of smallpox to cure you of smallpox or inoculate you against it. But it seems to have come in the Romantics with the coming of machines and industrialization. And that's why I think one good antidote is nature. I mean, you just spend a lot of time outdoors and do hiking, climbing, all that kind of stuff, and not get so. Also, it's institutionalization in mass society. I think that comes in with industrialization. And you didn't have countries of 236 million people, before this century. Most groups existed in maybe groups of 200. And they have ways of dispelling their own madness. I was going to talk a little bit about the shaman, who, the shaman is a special kind of healer, and it's a theatrical healer. So in the smaller group, what happens, if you read that quote, I won't go through the whole thing, but somebody gets sick in the tribe, and they can't be cured by anybody else. And somehow they figure a way to cure themselves. And usually in that process, they become a shaman. And they realize they have to become a shaman. This is the whole idea that maybe it is for some people it's chosen. And so they usually go through a training with other shamans. And then this is just a description of what a shaman will do in the tribe. This is a ceremony. It says the manner in which the shaman gives expression to his function as spiritual representative of his tribe is both interesting and spectacular. So far as his manifestations have been reported, they consist of a confined extempore performance of music, generally of the drum, song, dancing, and a certain amount of mimesis, of acting. The dramatic element varies perhaps more than any other, ranging from ventriloquial and voice-throwing feats, representing the voices of animals and birds coming naturally from various quarters, and the speech of dead relatives and friends of those present, to elaborate scenic performances bordering on genuine drama. The dance is generally rapid and exhausting, though often sustained for a long period, and it is important to remark, perfectly controlled. The movements of the shaman appear abandoned and wild, partly because of the extreme rapidity of the dance, partly because of the unfamiliarity of this type of dance to European and native alike. It seems to have a close resemblance to the dances of the bodhisattvas depicted in Buddhist paintings, but it undoubtedly bears some relation to the fire. It is an important fact that the shaman never hits any of his audience, though the dance generally takes place in a restricted space between the fire and the audience in the crowded yurt or the tent. So what it seems to me may have happened is that this primitive, if you want to call it that, form of healing really has been cast onto the artist. And when you have industrialization, when you have more institutionalization, when you have more and more rules, all of us are asked really to act more and more mechanically in this world as we get older, and in the world as it's developing. One theory I have is that, so we can live in spaceships if we ever have to get out there. But so that perhaps the whole romantic thing came as an antidote, and that these people feel the need to throw themselves on the fire, and that's the whole Christian thing too. That feeds into that as well. That answer it, Clark, or sort of? I mean, sort of. That's the best I can do. Okay, well, if you have any more questions, you can ask me after. Thank you very much. It was fun to get it out of my system. Yeah, sure. See if I can.
Saturday. Sunday.